of us on AI. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Blinken, before I start, I just want to acknowledge the medical and humanitarian workers who need to secure safe access to provide badly needed care. Israeli Americans, including Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who remains hostages of Hamas. The over 100 other hostages who remain unaccounted for or trapped by terrorists in Gaza. And the tens of thousands of lives, Palestinians, Israeli, American, Jordanian, Thai. The list is long and overwhelming, already lost to the latest tragic conflict in the Middle East. My staff and I have relied heavily on the department's close support and collaboration to advocate for Illinoisans and others in Gaza. And I expect we'll need to continue to work closely together to provide assistance and ensure oversight and accountability of the situation. So I want to express my appreciation for all of the department staff for working around the clock with me and my team. My first question has to do with ASEAN. It goes to something we've discussed here last year, the need for sustained, strong investments in our relationships with allies and partners in Southeast Asia. And I applaud the elevation of the U.S.-ASEAN relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership last year and the increases in resources for the U.S. mission to ASEAN. But as I said at the opening of the new U.S.-ASEAN Center in December, China continues to increase its engagement and gain in popularity in the region, and there is so much more that we can do. And that includes showing up. High-level participation at ASEAN summits and ministerial meetings is no longer a nice-to-have option. It's a must-do. I'm still hearing about Indonesia's deep disappointment over last year's ASEAN summit, and I'm sure you are as well. In this chair year for Laos, are we doing enough to support Embassy Vientiane and through them the host government in carrying out successful ASEAN meetings? And can you commit to high-level participation in the upcoming ministerial and ASEAN summit?
Thank you very much, Senator. And I fully agree with you, and I believe the answers to both questions are yes and yes. We're determined to build on what has already been a deeply strengthened partnership and relationship between the United States and ASEAN, including the President hosting, as you know, a special summit with ASEAN here in Washington. My own engagement with ASEAN, and going forward, our support both for Laos as it's in the chair, to do what we can to help it succeed in its chairmanship, and also, yes, be present.
Thank you. I also want to touch on internal reforms you've led at state. Every year, and especially in an election year, the strength of our republic depends on resilient institutions. So I want to commend the critical work of modernizing and strengthening the State Department itself. Important progress has been made, but when it comes to physical accessibility at department facilities, it's been my experience that there is still a lot of work to do. The lack of basic accommodations like ramps and working buttons to open heavy security doors are still serious obstacles to the full participation of persons with disabilities, whether they're employees who need accommodations for themselves or for family members who would join them abroad, or our counterparts and guests. So in last year's state authorization, I included a requirement for the Bureau of Overseas Buildings Operations to report on accessibility at overseas diplomatic missions and estimate the cost of making our facilities usable by persons with disabilities. Will that report be delivered on time next month? And do you have any insight into what has been learned through the assessment so far? And can you speak more broadly to what the department is doing to ensure employees receive the accommodations they need when they need them through a streamlined and common sense process?
In short, Senator, I'm committed to that. We're committed to that. I want to come back to you on the timing of the report to make sure that it's on time, or if it's not, why not? So I'll come back to you on that. We have a request for an additional $11.5 million in the budget for bolstering accessibility in the department and in our facilities. It's something that I take very seriously, and of course, there is physical accessibility, which is critical. We're also doubling down on efforts with technology to make sure that we have the right technology in the right hands. I think we've made real progress on that, but as always, more can and should be done.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, staffing and retention continue to be challenges, so I'd like to use the rest of my time to speak in more detail about that, including what you've done to address the perennial challenge of employment for foreign service employees. Last year, late last year, I helped introduce the Readiness Act to support federal employees who are relocating to join their spouse on an official assignment. It would require federal government agencies to make the maximum effort to retain them by simply allowing telework or transfer, or as a last resort, a period of leave without pay status. Would you say that current policies at state support this type of common sense flexibility so that a civil servant isn't needlessly faced with the choice of either stay with their family on an overseas deployment when the spouse is being sent to represent our nation overseas, or keep their job and continue their public service career?
We're very much working in that direction, and I think we've made progress. Again, still more to do. We also have the Family Service, the Foreign Service Families Act, that we're working to implement to create greater flexibilities, greater opportunities for family members. We have more and more people who are now serving as eligible family members. We have greater flexibilities for people to make sure that they are able to continue their employment as a spouse or partner when they're overseas. And I think that's part of an ongoing effort to improve those opportunities and to support families, because we know that if we want to not only attract but retain the best people in the department, we have to make sure that we're also providing the support they need for their families. Otherwise, they'll do something else, go somewhere else.
Thank you. Can you speak to the importance of being able to pay competitive rates to local nationals who work at embassies? I've heard this at many of our embassies as I've traveled,
Yeah.
and it's not limited to a particular region. I heard it in Europe. I've heard it in
Right.
Asia, where it is often very hard to maintain quality local staff because they can't be paid at a rate that is competitive, and even though they want to stay with us and they're very loyal. Can you speak to the challenges in your budget?
Yes, that's correct, and I think it's important to start with this. Literally the heart of our enterprise, the State Department, are locally employed staff. About 2/3 of the State Department employees are locally engaged staff. Our embassies can't function without them. And not only do they fill vital functions in the embassies, they're also the most extraordinary connectivity between our embassies and the countries in which we're engaged. In so many countries, the local staff has borne the brunt of global inflation and trying to keep pace with that in countries around the world that are not doing as well as the United States has been a challenge. And you're right, it's in many regions. It's not in any one place. We've taken steps to address this. First, for a number of people, to try to deal with the impact of that, and then just coming out of COVID, which was so devastating for so many. One-time increases in their compensation. Second, we've looked at the way we assess compensation, and we've tried to bring in more criteria so that we better take into account what the actual cost of living is in a given country, not simply a sort of equation to someone in a similarly situated job. So that's now coming into effect. We have worked to budget in, including in this budget, a guaranteed 2% increase every year so people can see that they will have sustained support. And of course, there are other one-time measures that we're looking at to help people. But the bottom line is we have to do this. We need to do this if we're going to sustain our missions, and the budget reflects that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz.